When my son-in-law threw me to the kitchen floor, he yelled, "That's not how you make a simple sauce. You're useless, it's all wrong," he shouted, while my daughter pretended not to hear anything from the living room. What they didn't know was that I had just received a letter from the bank, a letter that would change not only my destiny, but theirs as well. And for the first time in years, I smiled inside. But before continuing, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories are reaching. My name is Mary, I am 68 years old, and until 3 months ago, I was living alone in my small house on the outskirts of Dallas, Texas. It was there that I raised my only daughter, Sarah, after my husband James passed away from a heart attack almost 2 decades ago. I have always been self-sufficient, managing my life with dignity and independence. Everything changed when I suffered a fall and fractured my hip. It wasn't serious, but the doctor said I would need help for a few months during recovery. That's when Sarah suggested I move in with her and her husband, Richard. "Mum, it will be temporary, just until you recover completely," she told me, with that tone of voice I knew so well. It was the same one she used as a little girl when she wanted to convince me of something. "And this way, you can help us with a few things around the house, like cooking. You know how much Richard loves your cooking." I hesitated. Something inside me knew it wasn't a good idea, but the thought of being alone during recovery scared me more. Besides, it was my daughter asking for help. How could I refuse? So I packed a few suitcases with the essentials and moved into their apartment in New York City. It was a nice, modern place with 3 bedrooms. The guest room would be mine for now. Small, but comfortable enough. The first few days were quiet. I was still adjusting, taking painkillers, and doing physical therapy at home. Sarah worked all day at a law firm, and Richard, who was a real estate agent, spent more time at home than she did. At first, he was polite. He brought me tea, asked if I needed anything, but there was something in his gaze that made me uneasy. A contained impatience, a constant assessment, as if I were an object he tolerated only because he had no other choice. As I got better and started moving around the house, Richard began assigning me chores. First, it was washing the dishes, then cleaning the bathroom. Soon, I was cooking all the meals, doing the general cleaning and washing his laundry. My physical therapy became an inconvenience in the schedule of chores he silently imposed on me. "Sarah, this isn't what we agreed upon," I mentioned one night when we were alone. "I'm still recovering, and it seems like I've become his housekeeper." My daughter looked away, that same look from when she was a teenager, and she knew she was wrong but didn't want to admit it. "Mum, you know how organized Richard is. He likes things done his way. Please don't cause trouble. It's just for a few more weeks." But the weeks turned into 2 months, and Richard became increasingly demanding, more critical. Nothing I did was good enough. The house wasn't clean enough, the clothes weren't ironed correctly, the food wasn't cooked to the exact point, and Sarah, my only daughter, the girl I raised alone with so much love, simply became absent, physically present, but emotionally somewhere else. As if she had built a wall not to hear, not to see what was happening inside her own home. On that fateful afternoon, I was preparing a tomato sauce, a simple recipe I had made for decades. Richard walked into the kitchen, looked at the pot, and made a face of disgust. "What are you doing?" "Tomato sauce for dinner," I replied without looking at him, continuing with my task. "That's not tomato sauce. It's too thick, and that color is horrible. That's not how you make it." I took a deep breath. "Richard, I've been making this sauce since before you were born. It's perfect." That's when he exploded. His face turned red with rage, his eyes wide like a wild animal's. "That's not how you make a simple sauce, you old incompetent woman. It's all wrong." He grabbed my arm forcefully, pulling me away from the stove. I lost my balance. My hip wasn't completely recovered yet, and I fell to the kitchen floor. "Richard, what did you do?" Sarah's voice came from the kitchen doorway. She had just arrived home from work right at that moment. "She fell by herself," he replied coldly. "You know how clumsy old people are." Sitting on the floor, hand to my temple, I looked at my daughter. She looked at me, then at Richard, and then at the floor. And she didn't say anything. Absolutely nothing. At that moment, something inside me changed. The physical pain was bearable, but the wound in my soul, the abandonment by my own daughter, hurt more than any blow. I got up alone, staggering, and went to my room. I closed the door and sat on the bed, still feeling my head throb. It was then that I saw the envelope that had arrived that morning, the letter from the bank that I still hadn't opened. With trembling hands, I tore open the envelope and began to read. And as the words came into focus, my heart raced. It was about my husband, James. About a secret bank account he maintained, an account no one knew about, an account with a value that made my eyes widen, in disbelief. James, my late husband, had left a hidden fortune, and I was the sole beneficiary. There, sitting on that bed, with my head aching and my dignity in shreds, I began to devise a plan that would make Richard and Sarah bitterly regret the way they had treated me. I wiped my face with a tissue and smiled. For the first time in a long time, the power was in my hands, and I was going to use it. The next morning, I woke up with my head throbbing, but my determination was unshakable. The small cut on my temple had stopped bleeding, leaving only a purple mark that I tried to conceal with my hair. I didn't want Richard or Sarah to notice any difference in my behavior. They needed to believe I was still the same fragile, submissive old woman. I left the room and went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast, as I always did. Richard was already there, checking his phone. He didn't even look at me when I entered. "Good morning," I mumbled, keeping my eyes down. He grunted something unintelligible in response. I started frying eggs and making toast, exactly the way he liked it. My mind, however, was miles away, calculating every step of my plan. The bank letter informed me that James had left almost $7 million in a secret account. Money from investments he made over decades without my knowing. "To protect you in the future," his attached letter said. James had always been a private man, but I never imagined he was secretly saving so much money. The most ironic thing of all was that, among the investments, there was a complex of apartments, including the apartment where Sarah and Richard lived. Yes, the place they called home, the place they wanted to kick me out of as soon as I fully recovered, actually belonged to me. They paid rent to a real estate company that managed the property, unaware that the money was going into an account that was now mine. Sarah walked into the kitchen, already dressed for work. She looked at the bruise on my forehead and quickly looked away, as if the sight of that mark bothered her more than the fact that caused it. "Mum, are you okay?" she asked, feigning concern. "I am, honey. It was just an accident," I replied, pouring her coffee. Richard let out a muffled laugh that Sarah pretended not to hear. The tension was palpable in the kitchen, but I kept my expression neutral, serving them as if nothing had happened. As soon as they left for work, I took my phone and called the bank. I needed to confirm everything personally and take possession of that inheritance. The account executive was very solicitous when I explained the situation. "Ms. Mary, we need you to come to the branch with your documents to finalize the asset transfer process. Mr. James left everything very well organized, but there are some legal procedures that must be completed in person." "I understand. Can I come today?" "Of course. It will be a pleasure to assist you. I just ask that you bring your identification, social security card, And the letter we sent you. I hung up the phone and immediately called a cab. The bank branch was downtown Chicago, about 20 minutes away. While I waited, I dressed as best I could, wearing one of the few elegant outfits I had brought. I wanted to look dignified when I walked into that bank. On the way, my mind was buzzing. I was never a vengeful person. I always believed in forgiveness and understanding. But the constant humiliation, the disrespect, and especially the complicit silence of my daughter, had created a wound that would not heal with simple apologies. The bank was an imposing building in the financial heart of Chicago. I felt small walking into the marble lobby, but I straightened my shoulders and walked toward the service desk. I was directed to a private room where an account manager was waiting for me. "Miss Mary, it's a pleasure to meet you," said the man in the dark suit, standing up to greet me. "I'm Alex, investment manager. We've been waiting for your visit for quite some time." "How so?" I asked, confused. "Well, Mr. James passed away almost 20 years ago, and the instructions were to notify you about these investments only in case of extreme need. We received a system notification about movements in the property where you resided, indicating a possible change. That's when we decided to contact you." I sat down, absorbing that information. James had thought of everything, even a system that would protect me if I lost my house. "Let's get down to the details then," Alex continued, opening a folder on the table. "As we mentioned in the letter, Mr. James left approximately $7 million in various investments. Most of it is in real estate, a complex of apartments in the Willow Creek building, and 2 houses on the Florida coast. There are also financial applications and stocks that have yielded significantly over the years." He showed me documents, contracts, statements. The reality of that fortune began to materialize before my eyes. I, who had always lived so simply, counting every cent not to waste, was now a wealthy woman. And as for the apartment in the Willow Creek building, where my daughter currently lives, does she know that the property belonged to my husband? Alex consulted some documents. "No, ma'am. The contract is in the name of a corporation, Sun Real Estate, which manages all the properties. The tenants are unaware of who the real owner is. It was a measure of discretion that Mr. James preferred to adopt." That was perfect for my plan. No one knew I was the owner of that apartment, not even my daughter. "Alex, I need to make some changes immediately. First, I want to assume direct control of all the properties. Second, I want to review all the rental contracts. And third, I specifically want to reevaluate the contract for apartment 302 in the Willow Creek building." The manager nodded, not questioning my motives. We spent the next 2 hours organizing the transfer of all assets to my name and establishing a new bank account with access to all the money. When I left the bank, it was almost lunchtime. I carried a new credit card in my pocket, with no spending limit, and a feeling of power I had never experienced before. It was as if a new world was opening up before me. Instead of returning to Sarah's apartment, I headed to a luxury hotel downtown. I needed space to think, to plan every detail of what would come next. At the reception, I booked the executive suite for a week. "Any luggage, ma'am?" the receptionist asked. "No, I didn't bring anything," I replied. "But don't worry, I'm going to get everything I need." The room was magnificent, with a panoramic view of the city. I sat on the king-size bed and looked around, still processing the turn my life had taken in less than 24 hours. I picked up the hotel phone and dialed Sarah's apartment number. She answered on the 3rd ring with a worried voice. "Mum, where are you? We came back for lunch and you had disappeared." "I'm fine, Sarah," I replied calmly. "I had to go out to take care of some pending matters." "What pending matters? You didn't even call." We were worried. I almost laughed when I heard that. Worried? Them? The same Sarah who had pretended not to see her husband push me the day before now wanted to feign concern. I'll be out for a few days, I said firmly. Don't worry, I'm perfectly fine. But Mom, you're still recovering. Where are you going to stay? What do you need? I've taken care of everything, Sarah. I'll call you later. I hung up before she could protest further. I immediately called Sun Real Estate and scheduled a meeting for the afternoon. It was time to start moving the pieces on the board. I ordered room service, a full meal with appetizer, main course, and dessert. When the food arrived, I savored every bite slowly. It wasn't just the refined taste I appreciated, but the sense of control over my own life. I thought of Richard, of how he had humiliated me in the kitchen, criticizing a simple tomato sauce. I thought of Sarah, of how she had become a stranger, allowing me to be mistreated in her own home. You don't know what's coming for you, I murmured to myself, taking a sip of wine. The plan was just beginning. The meeting with Sun Real Estate was enlightening. Mr. Frank, a middle-aged man with a keen gaze, received me in his office with visible surprise. He clearly didn't expect James's widow to show up after so many years to take control of the business. Ms. Mary, it's a pleasure to finally meet you, he said, indicating a comfortable chair opposite him. Your husband always spoke highly of you, but insisted that we keep your identity in absolute secrecy, even after his passing. James was always a cautious man, I replied, sitting down with an upright posture. But now I need to understand exactly what my properties are and how they are being managed. Mr. Frank opened a thick folder and began to explain each of the properties in detail. In addition to the building where Sarah lived, there were 4 other apartments in different Chicago neighborhoods, all rented and generating considerable monthly income. Regarding the Willow Creek building, specifically apartment 302, occupied by your daughter and her husband, the contract value is significantly below market. It was a specific instruction from your husband to maintain a symbolic value for your daughter. And how much exactly do they pay? Only 30% of the market value. An apartment of that size, in that location, would easily be worth 3 times more. I nodded slowly, processing the information. James, even after passing away, was still taking care of our daughter, and she didn't even know it. Mr. Frank, I want to make some changes immediately, I said, determinedly. First, I want the contract for apartment 302 to be updated to the full market value without prior notice or explanation. He looked at me in surprise. Ms. Mary, that would represent a significant increase for the tenants, and since she is your daughter, they don't know the property is mine, correct? No, absolutely not. As I mentioned, we maintained absolute secrecy. Excellent. Then I want the new contract to be sent as an administrative decision by the real estate company. Communicate that the owner decided to update the values to the market standard. Mr. Frank hesitated for a moment but nodded. As you prefer. Any other modifications? Yes. I want all correspondence regarding that specific apartment to be sent directly to me. I want to know when they pay, if they are late, any communication. We spent the next hour reviewing all the contracts, and I made sure to know every detail of my new assets. When I left the real estate office, it was already getting dark. I returned to the hotel feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. I never imagined I would use financial resources as an instrument of retaliation, especially against my own daughter. But the pain of betrayal and humiliation was still fresh. The bruise on my temple was a constant reminder of what I had suffered. My phone rang. It was Sarah again. Mom, for goodness sake, where are you? We're worried. I'm staying at a hotel, Sarah. I needed some time for myself. A hotel? With what money? You barely have your pension, and your things are still here. Please come home. That apartment isn't my home, Sarah. And as for the money, don't worry, I have enough. What do you mean by that? Are you hiding something from me? In the same way that you hide things from me? Like the fact that your husband assaults me and you pretend not to see it? A heavy silence settled on the line. Mum, you fell. It was an accident. Don't lie to me, Sarah. Don't lie to yourself. Richard pushed me and you saw it. And you did nothing. I heard a catch in her breath on the other end. Mum, things are complicated. Richard has a difficult temper, but he's going through a lot of stress at work and… Stop, I interrupted firmly. I don't want to hear excuses. I want you to reflect on your decisions. I'll stay at the hotel for now. Don't look for me until I contact you. I hung up, feeling a heavy heart. How did we get to this point? How could my daughter, whom I raised with so much love, become complicit in my humiliation? In the following days, I devoted myself to a complete transformation. I went to department stores and bought an entire wardrobe, elegant clothes I never thought I would wear. I visited a luxury salon where I had my hair cut and coloured, abandoning the older lady look I had adopted in recent years. Every new garment, every change in my appearance was like removing layers of a life of self-denial. I had spent decades nullifying myself, first for my husband, then for my daughter. I always put the needs of others above my own. As I looked in the hotel mirror, I barely recognized the woman reflected there. The short, well-cut hair, the more confident posture, the clothes that enhanced my figure instead of hiding it. A week after I left Sarah's apartment, I received the first call from Mr. Frank. Miss Mary, as requested, the new contract was sent to apartment 302. The increase will be effective starting next month. Any reaction? Yes, we received a rather agitated call from Mr. Richard. He demanded to speak with the owner and said the increase is abusive and illegal. And what did you respond? Exactly what you instructed us, that the owner prefers to remain anonymous, and that the value is in line with the current market. I smiled internally, imagining Richard's expression upon receiving the news. The increase would represent a significant impact on their budget, especially considering the lifestyle they maintained. Excellent, Mr. Frank. Keep me informed of any developments. I didn't have to wait long. That same afternoon, Sarah called me again, her voice visibly upset. Mum, you won't believe it. The real estate company sent us a new contract with an absurd increase, 3 times more than what we currently pay. It's outrageous. Really, what an unpleasant situation, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Richard is furious. He tried to talk to the owner, but the real estate company refuses to reveal who it is. They said they have every right to adjust the value to the market price. And they do have that right, I commented calmly. But how are we going to pay that? You know how tight we are. And with you here, I mean, with the extra expenses we have now. So that was it. I was an extra expense. Not a mother who needed temporary support. Not a person who deserved respect and care. Just an inconvenient expense. Perhaps you should look for a more affordable place to live, I suggested. But we love this apartment. We've lived here for 5 years. All our things are organized. The furniture was chosen specifically for this space. We can't just leave. Then pay the fair value. Mom, you're not helping. I thought you might give us some useful advice. Not this coldness. The hypocrisy was so great that I almost laughed. Sarah, do you remember when I was pushed in the kitchen and hit my head? Do you remember how you didn't defend me? How you preferred to look the other way? Coldness is that, honey. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have commitments. I hung up, feeling a mix of guilt and satisfaction. I knew I was being harsh, But this was only the first phase of my plan. I wanted them to feel a fraction of the helplessness I had felt. I wanted them to understand what it's like to have the rug pulled out from under your feet. In reality, what I really wanted was for my daughter to open her eyes, to realize the man she was married to regain the dignity and empathy I had tried to teach her throughout her life. But for that, she needed to face consequences, and these were just beginning. 2 weeks passed. I stayed in the hotel, organizing my new life. I opened an exclusive account for my personal expenses and transferred a considerable amount. I started looking for apartments to buy. I wanted a place of my own where I could start over. Mr. Frank kept me informed about the situation with Sarah and Richard. They had paid the first month with the new value, but 5 days late and after many complaints. According to the building doorman, the arguments between the two had intensified. Neighbours reported yelling almost every night. A part of me felt guilty for causing my daughter trouble, but another part, the one that still felt the pain of humiliation, knew it was necessary. Some lessons are only learned through difficulty. One sunny morning, while having coffee on the hotel balcony, I received an unexpected call. It was Mr. Miller, the lawyer who had handled James's business and who apparently was also involved in the administration of his secret inheritance. "Ms. Mary, I hope I'm not bothering you. The bank informed me that you finally became aware of the assets your husband left." "Yes, doctor. It was quite a surprise." "I imagine. James made me promise to keep everything a secret until it was absolutely necessary. He always said you were too strong a woman to need a financial safety net." That took me by surprise. Did James think I was strong? The same man who made all the financial decisions, who never included me in money matters. "I have some additional information that needs to be discussed personally," the lawyer continued. "Mr. James left specific instructions regarding certain assets. We scheduled an appointment for that same afternoon at his office. The curiosity consumed me. What other surprises had James left? Mr. Miller's office was in an old building in the downtown historic district. It was an elegant place, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and an atmosphere of almost solemn seriousness. "Ms. Mary, please have a seat," he said, indicating a leather armchair. "Coffee? No, thank you." While his secretary brought the drinks, the lawyer opened a drawer and took out a yellowed envelope, sealed with red wax. My name was written on the front, in James's unmistakable handwriting. "Your husband gave this to me shortly before passing away. He asked me to keep it along with the asset documents and only give it to you when you assumed control of the properties." With slightly trembling hands, I broke the wax seal and opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, several pages written in James's same elegant hand. I began to read. "My dearest Mary, if you are reading this, it means the unthinkable has happened. Something forced you to seek out the resources I saved as a last protection. Knowing you, I know you must be wondering why I never told you about this money, why I kept these investments secret. The truth, my love, is that I always admired your strength, your independence. You were never a woman defined by what you possessed, but by who you were. And I feared that, knowing of the existence of this fortune, you might somehow change, become dependent on it. Perhaps it was a misjudgment on my part. Perhaps I should have trusted you more, but my intention was always to protect you, to ensure that you would never be left destitute. Among the properties, you will find the apartment where our Sarah lives. It was a deliberate decision of mine to buy that property through the company and rent it to them for a symbolic value. I wanted to ensure that our daughter always had a safe home, without it seeming like charity. You know how proud you always were. But Mary, my love, if you are accessing these resources now, it means something serious has happened. I trust your judgment. I trust your strength. Use this money as you see fit. It is your right. Remember only that no matter what has happened, you always were and always will be the strongest woman I knew. The woman who faced life by my side, never complaining about the difficulties. The woman who raised our daughter with so much love and dedication. Never doubt your own strength, Mary, and never allow others to doubt it either. With all my love, today and always, James. Tears streamed down my face when I finished reading. I hadn't cried like that since James's funeral. It was as if he were there with me, speaking directly to my heart through those words written so many years ago. Mr. Miller waited patiently for me to compose myself, offering me a tissue and more coffee. Your husband was an extraordinary man, Miss Mary. He truly loved you very much. Yes, I whispered, wiping away the tears. He was. There is something else I need to give you, the lawyer said, opening a drawer in his desk. He took out a small blue velvet box and placed it on the table. James asked for this to accompany the letter. I opened the box carefully. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a pendant shaped like a small key. It's symbolic, Mr. Miller explained. He said it represented the freedom he wanted you to have in case you needed to start over. I put on the necklace immediately. The gold key rested cool against my skin, right over my heart. It was as if James was telling me to move forward, to open new doors. Thank you, Doctor. This means a lot to me. I left the office with a lighter heart, despite the tears. James's words resonated in my mind. Never doubt your own strength. He always knew this day might come, the day I would need to stand up alone and face adversities he couldn't foresee. Back at the hotel, I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. I thought of Sarah, of how she had grown up, of the decisions she had made. I thought of Richard, of his cruelty, of how he had shown his true character. I thought of myself, the woman I was, and the woman I was becoming. James's letter had moved me deeply, but instead of diverting me from the path I had chosen, it strengthened my resolve. It was no longer about revenge, but about justice, about setting boundaries, about demanding respect. That night, I made a decision. I called Mr. Frank. I need you to send another notice to apartment 302, I said firmly. Starting next month, we will not accept any more late payments. Any delay will result in a fine, and if persistent, eviction proceedings. Miss Mary, are you sure? It's a rather rigorous procedure. I am absolutely sure. Apply the same rules you would apply to any other tenant. After hanging up, I sent Sarah a text message. I'd like to have lunch with you tomorrow. Just you, without Richard. We have important matters to discuss. The reply came almost instantly. Of course, Mum. I miss you. Where should we meet? I suggested an elegant restaurant downtown, a place we had never been to together. I wanted neutral ground for our conversation. The next morning I dressed with extra care. I chose a navy blue pantsuit and blazer that gave me confidence, complemented by the key necklace James had left me. I looked in the mirror and saw a different woman from the one who had been thrown to the floor in her own daughter's kitchen. I saw someone with purpose, with strength, with dignity. I arrived at the restaurant promptly at 12 o'clock noon. Sarah was already there, nervously checking her phone. When she saw me, her eyes widened in surprise. Mum, is that you? I smiled, sitting down across from her. Yes, honey, it's me. You're so different. The hair, the clothes. Changes were necessary, I replied simply. The waiter approached, and we ordered. Sarah seemed restless. Her eyes constantly returned to my transformed appearance, the jewelry on my neck, the confidence in my posture. "Mum, I'm worried about you. You disappeared like that, stayed in a hotel. With what money? And now you appear completely transformed. Is something going on that I don't know about?" I took a sip of water, keeping my gaze fixed on her. "Many things have been going on that you don't know about, Sarah, and many others that you do know about, but prefer to pretend you didn't see." She lowered her eyes, her hands nervously fidgeting with the napkin. "If you're talking about what happened with Richard, it was an accident. He didn't mean to—" "Don't lie to me, Sarah," I interrupted firmly. "Don't insult my intelligence. He pushed me, deliberately, and you saw it." A heavy silence settled between us. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Things with Richard are complicated, Mum. He has anger management issues. He's going to therapy. Sometimes he gets better. Sometimes he gets worse. And for that, you allow him to assault your mother?" Tears began to stream down her face. "I'm scared, Mum. I'm scared of what he might do if I confront him directly." My heart sank. Sarah wasn't just an accomplice. She was also a victim. "He's hurt you before, hasn't he?" She didn't answer with words, but her silence said it all. I reached across the table and held her hand. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because I was embarrassed," she sobbed quietly. "Because I didn't want you to see me like this, weak, unable to defend myself. And because I thought I could change him. That if I was patient enough, understanding enough, he would get better." At that moment, I understood everything. The reason she had invited me to live with them was not just to help me with my recovery, but also because she thought my presence might moderate Richard's behavior. She was seeking protection, even unconsciously. "Sarah, you have to leave that relationship. He's not going to change. Men like Richard don't change." "I can't, Mum. Where would I go? And now with this absurd rent increase, we can barely pay the bills. Richard is getting more stressed, more violent." "You can come live with me," I said instead. "I'm looking for an apartment to buy. We can live together, start over." She looked at me in surprise. "Buy an apartment? Mum? With what money? And what happened to you? You look like a completely different person." "I am a different person, Sarah. The woman who allowed herself to be humiliated and mistreated is gone. As for the money, your father left more than you imagine." Her eyes widened. "Dad? But he died almost 20 years ago." "Yes, and he was much more prepared than any of us imagined." I told her part of the story, about the letter from the bank, about the investments James had made. I didn't mention that their apartment was one of those investments. Not yet. "But why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I just found out myself. Your father arranged everything so that I would only be notified in case of extreme necessity." Our food arrived, but Sarah barely touched it. She was absorbing everything, trying to reconcile the image of the submissive, dependent mother with the confident, financially independent woman sitting across from her. "What are you going to do now?" "First, I'm going to buy my own place. Then, I want to help you free yourself from Richard. But Sarah, you have to want it. You have to be willing to take that step." She nodded slowly. Tears were still silently streaming. "I'm scared, Mum. So scared." "I know, my daughter. But you need to know something. You are stronger than you think. You are the daughter of James and me. Strength is in your blood." As we finished lunch, I felt I had planted a seed. I didn't force Sarah to make a decision right then. She needed to find her own courage, her own path to freedom. What she didn't know was that I already had a plan. And that plan would involve Richard facing the full consequences of his actions sooner than he could imagine. a plan that would begin with the eviction notice already being prepared by Mr. Frank's office. In the following days, I intensified my search for an apartment. I wanted a spacious place, with 2 bedrooms, one for me and one for Sarah, for when she was ready to leave Richard. I found a perfect property in a quiet neighborhood near a park in Brooklyn. It was bright, airy, with a large balcony facing east, where the morning sun would stream in generously. I made an offer immediately with cash. The owner accepted without hesitation. After all, who would refuse a full payment without financing or bureaucracy? Within a week, the apartment was in my name. While organizing the move to my new home, I received another call from Mr. Frank. His voice sounded strained. "Ms. Mary, we have a situation at apartment 302. What happened? The month's payment was due 10 days ago, and we have not received any amount. We sent the fine notification as per your instructions, and that generated a rather agitated reaction." What kind of reaction? Mr. Richard showed up at our office. He was visibly agitated, yelling, demanding to speak with the owner. When we informed him that this wouldn't be possible, he made threats. It was necessary to call security to escort him out. My heart raced. If Richard was capable of such behavior in public, in a professional environment, what wouldn't he do inside the house, where no one could see him? "Mr. Frank, immediately send a formal notification demanding payment within 48 hours, under penalty of initiating an eviction process. And please inform your team to document any inappropriate behavior from Mr. Richard. That may be necessary in the future." As soon as I hung up, I called Sarah. She answered in a low voice, almost whispering. "Mum, I can't talk now." "Are you okay, Sarah? Are you safe?" Yes. It's just not a good time. Richard is very nervous about the rent. We received a fine notification today." "Where is he now?" "He went to the real estate company to try to negotiate." "Listen to me carefully, Sarah. I want you to come meet me, now." "I can't, Mum. He'll be furious if I leave." "That's exactly why you have to leave. Don't you see the pattern? The control? The rage explosions? The violence?" I heard a catch in her breath on the other end of the line. "It's never been this bad as in the last few weeks," she confessed. "Since the rent increased, he's had near daily outbursts. Yesterday he smashed a plate against the wall because dinner was cold." "Sarah, this is only going to get worse. Please come see me. I'm at my new apartment. Write down the address. I'll be waiting." "I'll try, Mum, but I can't promise anything." I hung up, feeling a knot in my stomach. The situation was escalating faster than I imagined. Part of me wanted to back down, cancel the notifications, forgive the rent debt. But another part knew that would only be postponing the inevitable. Richard needed to be confronted with the consequences of his actions. I spent the next few hours arranging the room that would be Sarah's, putting on new sheets, organizing the space to make it feel cozy. It was my way of materializing the hope that she would come, that she would choose freedom. Around 7 o'clock at night, the doorbell rang. My heart skipped a beat. I opened the door, and there was Sarah, with a small carry-on suitcase and eyes swollen from crying. "Can I come in?" I hugged her without saying anything, feeling her body tremble against mine. I closed the door and guided her inside. "You're safe now," I whispered, stroking her hair as I did when she was little and had nightmares. "No one is going to hurt you here." Sarah pulled away slightly, looking around in surprise. "This place is yours. It's beautiful, Mum." "Ours," I corrected gently. "Your room is already prepared." I showed her the apartment, ending in the room I had specifically arranged for her arrival. Sarah sat on the bed, looking exhausted and disoriented. I don't know what to do, Mum. Our whole life is in that apartment. All the furniture, clothes, documents. We can get your things when it's safe, or buy new ones, if necessary. What matters now is that you are here. She nodded, letting the tears stream again. Richard is going to go crazy when he finds out I left. He came back from the real estate company furious, saying they were incompetent, that the owner is a profiteer, that he's going to sue everyone. When I told him maybe it would be better to look for a cheaper place, he threw his phone against the wall. A shiver ran down my spine. The violence was escalating dangerously. You made the right decision by coming here, Sarah. But how am I going to pay my bills? My salary barely covers my personal expenses. Richard is the one who always paid the rent, the bills. Don't worry about that now. We have enough resources. The important thing is for you to recover, to become strong. I prepared a simple dinner, vegetable soup and fresh bread I had bought earlier. We ate in silence on the balcony, watching the city lights turn on one by one on the horizon. "Mom," Sarah finally said, her voice calmer now. "Forgive me. For everything. For allowing Richard to treat you that way. For not defending you. For being so weak." "You are not weak, Sarah. Being here today proves it. You had the courage to take the first step to free yourself." I still can't believe I did this. Part of me still thinks I should go back, try one more time, give him another chance. That's how the cycle of abuse works. He mistreats you, then apologizes, promises to change, is kind for a while until the next explosion, and each cycle is worse than the last. She nodded slowly, recognizing the truth in my words. "How did you become so wise about this?" I smiled sadly. "By observing, reading, and mainly by living. I spent weeks being mistreated in your house, Sarah. I saw Richard's behavior, the red flags, the control he exerts over you." We remained silent again, each lost in our own thoughts. After dinner, Sarah went to her room, emotionally and physically exhausted. I stayed in the living room thinking about the next step. I knew Richard wouldn't easily accept Sarah's departure. Men like him consider their wives property, not partners. He would try to bring her back, using any tactic. Pleas, promises, threats. We needed to be prepared. The next morning I woke up early and found Sarah already in the kitchen making coffee. There was a new determination in her gaze. "Good morning, Mom. I hope you don't mind, but I used your kitchen." "Of course I don't mind. This is your home too." She smiled, placing a steaming cup in front of me. "I've been thinking. I need to go get my things at the apartment. Important documents, some clothes, personal belongings, but I'm afraid to go alone." "I'm not going to let you go alone," I replied immediately. "In fact, I have a better idea. I'm going to ask Mr. Frank from the real estate company to come with us. As the owner's representative, he has the authority to be present, and we're going to bring his security guard too." Sarah's eyes widened. "They would do that? Trust me, they will." I called Mr. Frank and explained the situation. He hesitated initially. Accompanying tenants in domestic disputes wasn't exactly part of his duties, but when I mentioned Richard's threats and suggested that the real estate company's presence would be a preventative measure against property damage, he agreed. We scheduled it for early afternoon, when Richard would probably be out on a real estate visit. When we arrived at apartment 302, Mr. Frank and the security guard, a burly man named Jeff, were waiting in the lobby. Sarah was visibly nervous, her hands trembling as she searched for the key in her purse. "What if he's home?" she whispered. "The doorman said he left an hour ago," Mr. Frank assured. "In any case, we are here to guarantee your safety." Sarah opened the door slowly. The apartment was in a state of chaos that shocked me. Empty alcohol bottles scattered across the living room, dirty dishes piled up in the kitchen sink, clothes thrown everywhere. "Oh my gosh," Sarah murmured. "He never left the house like this. He was always so meticulous with cleaning." "He's falling apart," I commented. "Let's hurry. Take only the essentials." Sarah went to the master bedroom while I stayed in the living room with Mr. Frank and Jeff. The security guard discreetly inspected the environment, noting signs of damage, impact marks on the wall, a broken vase in the corner, a cabinet door torn from its hinges. "Mr. Richard seems to have an explosive temper, Mr. Frank commented, with evident concern in his voice. "You have no idea how much," I replied in a low voice. Sarah returned 15 minutes later with 2 large suitcases, apparently containing clothes and personal items. "He hid my documents," she said, visibly agitated. "My passport, birth certificates, diplomas. They're not where they always were." That was typical of abusers. Hiding important documents was a form of control, of preventing the victim from escaping. "Let's look," I suggested. "He couldn't have taken them." For the next 20 minutes, we searched the apartment methodically. It was Mr. Frank who finally found a folder hidden at the bottom of a pantry cabinet in the kitchen. "I think this is what you're looking for," he said, handing the folder to Sarah. She opened it and sighed with relief upon seeing her documents intact. "Thank you. Now we can go." We were almost at the door when we heard the sound of keys. The door burst open before we could react, and there was Richard, frozen in surprise upon seeing all of us. His eyes moved slowly from Sarah to the suitcases, to me, to Mr. Frank, and to the security guard. His face went from surprise to understanding, and finally to fury. "What the hell is going on here?" he roared, advancing into the apartment. Jeff, the security guard, stepped forward, interposing himself between us and Richard. "Ms. Sarah is only collecting her personal belongings," Mr. Frank said in a calm, professional voice. "As a representative of the real estate company, I am here to ensure that the property is not damaged during this process." "Property?" Richard laughed bitterly. "You're worried about the damn property while my wife is abandoning me? This is your doing, isn't it?" He pointed at me, his eyes bloodshot. "You poisoned her against me." "Richard, please," Sarah intervened, her voice trembling but determined. "Don't make a scene. I'm leaving because I chose to leave. No one forced me." "You're not going anywhere," he shouted, trying to move forward, only to be stopped by Jeff. "Mr. Richard," the security guard said firmly, "I suggest you calm down. Ms. Sarah has every right to leave with her personal belongings." Richard stepped back, but his eyes burned with hatred. "This isn't over," he threatened, looking directly at me. "You're going to regret meddling in my life." "You've made enough threats for one day," I replied with a calmness I didn't feel. "And you've already caused too much damage to this property. The owner will be notified about the condition you left the apartment in." That seemed to destabilize him momentarily. "The owner? To hell with the owner. That vulture who tripled our rent overnight." "The owner has every right to adjust the value to the market price," Mr. Frank replied. "And now, if you'll excuse us, we are leaving." We left the apartment in tense silence, Richard watching with furious eyes as Jeff carried Sarah's suitcases. Only when we were in the elevator, doors closed, did Sarah break down crying. "He's never going to leave us alone," she sobbed. "You saw how he was. He's going to pursue us." I hugged my daughter, feeling her body tremble against mine. "He won't get to us," I promised. "I have a plan." And I really did. A plan that would put a definitive end to Richard's reign of terror. A plan that would reveal the truth about apartment 302 and much more. Back at my apartment, our apartment now, I helped Sarah organize her things in the room I had prepared for her. It was a bright and cozy space, with a comfortable bed, a small desk, and a reading armchair by the window. Nothing like the chaotic and oppressive environment we had left behind. "I can't believe I lived with that man for 5 years," Sarah murmured as she hung some clothes in the closet. "It's like I'm waking up from a nightmare." "That's exactly what's happening," I replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. "You were in a state of trance, manipulated by someone who knew exactly which buttons to push to keep you under control." "How was I so blind, Mum? How did I not realize what he was doing to me? To you?" "Abuse rarely starts obviously, Sarah. It begins with small things. Criticisms disguised as help, gradual isolation from friends and family, financial control. By the time you realize it, you're already trapped in a web." She nodded slowly, recognizing the truth in my words. "He's going to try to contact me," she said, with evident concern in her voice. "He'll call, text, maybe even show up here. First, we're going to change your phone number. As for the address, he doesn't know where we live, and the building has 24-hour security. You're protected here." That night was the first one we had dinner together as two free women, I, free from the humiliation I had suffered. Sarah, free from Richard's abusive control. I prepared the vegetable soup he had so cruelly criticized that fateful day, serving it with a satisfied smile. "To our freedom," I toasted, raising my glass of wine. "To our freedom," Sarah echoed, a small smile starting to form on her lips. The next morning we received a visit from Mr. Miller. The lawyer arrived promptly at 10 o'clock in the morning, carrying a folder of documents. Sarah was surprised by his presence. "Mum, what's going on?" "It's time for you to know the whole truth," I replied, indicating for us to sit in the living room. "There are more things about your father's inheritance that you need to know." Mr. Miller opened his folder and took out several documents. "Miss Sarah, your father was an extremely prepared man. In addition to securing your mother's financial future, he also left specific provisions for you." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "For me? But why?" "Your father wanted you to have independence, security, but he also wanted you to learn the value of work and responsibility. That's why he structured things in a very particular way." Mr. Miller looked at me as if asking for permission to continue. I nodded slightly. "Sarah," I began gently, "the apartment where you lived with Richard belongs to me. It was part of the investments your father left." "What?" The disbelief was etched on her face. "The reduced rent you paid all these years was a courtesy your father established, a way to help you without it seeming like charity." "But then, the rent increase?" "I was the one who ordered it," I confirmed. "When Richard pushed me that day in the kitchen, when you chose to look the other way, something broke inside me. I needed you to feel the weight of your actions." Sarah was silent for a few moments, processing everything. "So you knew, all along, that Richard was losing his mind over the rent, that we were on the verge of eviction, and you didn't say anything?" The resentment in her voice was palpable, and for a moment I wondered if I had gone too far. "Sarah, I needed you to see who Richard really is. Under pressure, people show their true character. He showed his, and you finally saw it. But I could have been seriously hurt. He was getting more and more violent with every new notification." "I was monitoring the situation closely," I explained. "Mr. Frank kept me informed. And when I realized things were escalating dangerously, I created a safe space for you to come to. It wasn't a coincidence that this apartment was ready exactly when you needed it most." She shook her head. torn between understanding and resentment. Even so, Mum, manipulating our lives like this. Mr. Miller cleared his throat softly, drawing our attention. If you'll allow me, there is something else that needs to be discussed. Something about the specific provisions Mr. James left for his daughter. He pulled another document from the folder. Miss Sarah, your father established a trust in your name. A considerable fund, I might add, but with a specific condition for access. What condition? The fund would only become available when you demonstrated the capacity to live independently, without being financially dependent on a spouse. The evaluation of this condition was left to your mother's discretion. Sarah looked at me, astonished. Dad thought of all this. How could he have known? Your father was an observant man. He saw tendencies in you early on. Your desire to please, your difficulty in setting boundaries. He wanted to protect you, but he also wanted you to learn to protect yourself. And now, what happens to this fund? Now, I replied softly, I can attest that you finally took the step toward your independence. By leaving an abusive relationship, you demonstrated that you value yourself above any financial or emotional dependency. The fund is yours. Mr. Miller nodded, pulling out a final document. This is the release form. With your mother's signature and yours, the fund will be transferred to an account in your name immediately. Sarah looked at the paper. Then she looked at me, tears glistening in her eyes. All this? Dad planned all this before he died. Your father always said that the greatest gift we can give to someone we love is the ability to be okay without us. He wanted to ensure you had the resources to be free, but also that you knew how to value that freedom. I signed the document without hesitation. Sarah did so with a trembling hand. How much is in this fund? Mr. Miller smiled slightly. The initial value was $500,000. With the accumulated returns over the last 20 years, it exceeds $7 million. The pen slipped from Sarah's fingers, falling silently onto the table. $7 million? I have $7 million? Yes, I confirmed. Enough for you to start your life exactly as you want, without having to depend on anyone, without having to accept less than you deserve. After Mr. Miller's departure, Sarah remained silent for a long time, looking out the window at the city. Finally, she turned to me. Why didn't you tell me sooner? About the apartment, about the fund, about everything? Because you needed to get there alone, Sarah. If I had simply told you that I was rich, that I could support you, you might have left Richard for the wrong reasons. For financial security, not because you recognized the abuse. You needed to see for yourself who he really was. But all that humiliation you suffered in our house, you could have avoided it. Perhaps, I admitted. But then I would just be the rich mother-in-law trying to control her daughter's life. You wouldn't have learned the most important lesson. What lesson? That no material comfort is worth your dignity. That no relationship should cost you your self-respect. She came closer and hugged me, squeezing me tightly. Thank you, Mum, for not giving up on me, even when I seemed to have given up on you. That night we slept soundly, as we hadn't in a long time. The truth, no matter how painful, had brought a peace that no lie could provide. The next morning, while we were having coffee, my phone rang. It was Mr. Frank. Ms. Mary, I have news about apartment 302. What happened? Mr. Richard is refusing to leave, even after receiving the official eviction notice. In fact, he caused quite a scene when our representative went to deliver the document. What kind of scene? He threatened the messenger, tore up the notification in front of him, and said he would only leave that apartment dead. We are considering calling the police. I looked at Sarah, who could partially hear the conversation and looked worried. Mr. Frank, I don't want to involve the police yet. I have a better idea. Can you arrange a visit to apartment 302 this afternoon? I want to personally inspect the condition of the property. Ms. Mary, considering Mr. Richard's behaviour, I don't think that's prudent. I will bring security guards with me, and I need you to be present as the official representative of the real estate company. After some back and forth, he reluctantly agreed. Sarah looked at me with wide eyes. Mum, what are you planning? You're not going to confront Richard, are you? That's exactly what I'm going to do. It's time for him to know who the real owner of that apartment is. No, it's too dangerous. You saw how unstable he is. I held her hands in mine. Sarah, some men only understand when they are confronted directly. Richard needs to understand that he can no longer intimidate anyone. Not you, not me, not the employees of the real estate company. Besides, I'm not going alone. Mr. Frank will be there, with security. Then I'm going too. No, Mum, she interrupted firmly. If we're going to do this, we're doing it together. I'm done hiding. I'm done being afraid. I saw in her eyes a determination I hadn't noticed before, a strength that reminded me so much of James's gaze. I nodded my head. Together, then. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we were in the lobby of the Willow Creek building. Mr. Frank was waiting for us with 2 burly security guards. His face showed clear apprehension. Ms. Mary, Miss Sarah, I can still advise you to reconsider. Mr. Richard was in the lobby earlier, visibly agitated, making threats to the doorman. All the more reason to resolve this once and for all, I replied firmly. Let's go up. In the elevator, Sarah squeezed my hand. I sensed she was nervous, but also determined. Fear no longer controlled her. When we reached the floor, one of the security guards went out first, checking the hallway. It was empty. We approached the door of apartment 302. Mr. Frank knocked firmly. Mr. Richard, Sun Real Estate, we need to speak with you. We heard movement inside the apartment, followed by heavy footsteps. The door burst open. Richard was there, eyes bloodshot, unshaven, clearly hadn't slept well. His gaze immediately fixed on Sarah. You came back, he said, a strange smile forming. Then he noticed the rest of us. What is this, an intervention? Mr. Richard, Mr. Frank began in a professional voice. We came to inspect the condition of the property and to discuss the eviction situation. The deadline for voluntary vacation expires tomorrow. I already said I'm not going anywhere, he growled. This has been my home for 5 years. I have rights. Actually, you don't, I said, stepping forward. Not when it comes to this specific property. He looked at me with contempt. You, again. The meddling old woman who poisoned my wife against me. What do you have to do with this? Everything, I replied calmly. I am the owner of this apartment. He froze. The understanding slowly dawned on his face. What? That's impossible. This apartment belongs to some anonymous investor. It belonged to my husband, James. After his death, it passed to me. I am the anonymous investor behind Sun Real Estate. He looked at Sarah, who confirmed with a nod. It's true, Richard. Mum owns the apartment where we lived for 5 years. The confusion on his face quickly turned to fury. Is this some kind of trap? Did you two plan this to humiliate me? No, Richard, Sarah replied with surprising calmness. You were the one who humiliated us. The one who controlled me for years, the one who pushed my mother and made her bleed in our kitchen. She fell by herself, always inventing stories. Stop the lies, I cut in. You have until tomorrow to voluntarily vacate the property. Otherwise, you will be evicted with police assistance, and we will file a complaint for property damage. Richard took a step toward me, but immediately the two security guards interposed themselves between us. "You're going to regret this, old woman," he hissed, his fists clenched. "No one humiliates me like this and gets away with it." "I'm recording this threat, Mr. Richard," Mr. Frank said, visibly holding a recorder. "If anything happens to Ms. Mary or Miss Sarah, the police will know exactly who to look for." Richard backed away, realizing the trap he had fallen into. "Get out of my house, all of you." "It's not your house, Richard," Sarah replied firmly. "It never was." As we walked away, he shouted one last provocation. "You're nothing without me, Sarah. You'll come back begging when you realize you can't support yourself." Sarah stopped, slowly turning to face him. "Actually, Richard, I just found out I'm a millionaire. I have more money than you ever dreamed of. And you know the best part? I will never need you or anyone like you in my life again." His expression, a mixture of shock, rage, and disbelief, was something neither of us would ever forget. The elevator door closed, leaving behind a man whose world had just collapsed. On the way back home, Sarah was silent, but I noticed a small smile on her lips. "How do you feel?" I asked. "Free," she replied simply. "Like I left a huge weight behind, like I can finally breathe." I knew exactly what she meant. It was how I had felt since I received that letter from the bank, since I discovered that I didn't need to accept the mistreatment, that I had the power to change my situation, the power of independence, the power of recovered dignity, the power of knowing that no one else could throw us to the floor and get away with it. In the following days, we watched the unfolding of the situation with Richard from a distance. Predictably, he refused to leave voluntarily, and the official eviction was executed with police assistance. Mr. Frank kept us informed of every step. How Richard yelled and struggled as he was escorted out of the building. How he threatened to sue everyone. How he finally broke down in tears in the lobby before being taken away. In other circumstances, I might have felt pity, but the memory of the fall on the floor, of Sarah's complicit silence, of the daily humiliation, all of that had hardened something inside me. It wasn't revenge I sought, but justice, and justice had been served. Apartment 302 needed a complete remodel after Richard left. The walls had punch marks, the cabinets were damaged, the floor scratched. It was as if he had unleashed all his rage on the property, as a final act of defiance. "We're going to completely transform it," I told Sarah, as we examined the damages a week after the eviction. "New colours, new finishes. It will be as if Richard was never here." "And after that?" "Then we can sell it or rent it for the fair value, whatever you prefer." Sarah looked around, the empty apartment echoing with memories she clearly wanted to forget. "Sell it," she decided. "I don't want any connection to this place. It represents a phase of my life I prefer to leave behind." I nodded my head. The healing process sometimes involved cutting ties completely, starting over. In the following weeks, our lives settled into a new rhythm. Sarah began attending therapy sessions to process the years of psychological abuse. I accompanied her in some joint sessions where we could openly discuss how we got to that point, how we allowed Richard to infiltrate between us, destroying the mother-daughter bond that had always been so strong. "He was meticulous," the therapist explained during a session. "Isolation, gaslighting, financial control, these are classic tactics of abusers, and they generally target the victim's relationships with people who might notice the abuse first, especially the mother." Sarah cried as she realized how she had been manipulated, how Richard had distorted her perception not only of herself, but also of me. "Forgive me, Mum," she sobbed, holding my hands. "For doubting you, for allowing him to hurt you." "It wasn't your fault," I replied, also with tears in my eyes. "You were a victim too. The important thing is that we both found our strength. We both freed ourselves. At home, we started establishing new traditions, new habits. We had dinner together every night, sharing the day's events. On Sundays, we prepared meals together. I generally took care of the main courses, Sarah of the desserts. It was a form of reconnection, of rebuilding the bond Richard had tried so hard to destroy. Sarah also began to rediscover passions she had abandoned during the marriage. She returned to painting, a hobby she loved in her teens, but that Richard constantly belittled. She enrolled in a photography course, something she had always wanted to do. Little by little, I watched my daughter bloom again, recovering not only her self-confidence, but also her joy. As for me, I discovered a new calling. I started attending a support group for women who had left abusive relationships. At first, I went only as a listener, absorbing the stories of other women who, like Sarah, had freed themselves from controlling partners. But soon I found myself sharing my own experience, not as the mother who was mistreated by her son-in-law, but as a woman who found the strength to get up and help her daughter do the same. "You can't imagine the power you have inside you," I told the group one night. "The power to say no, the power to set boundaries, the power to demand respect." The younger women looked at me with a mixture of admiration and hope. If a 68-year-old woman could reinvent herself, find her voice and her strength, any of them could too. One afternoon, while organizing some old photographs, part of the redecorating process of our apartment, I found a picture of James. He was smiling, holding baby Sarah in his arms, looking at the camera with those gentle eyes I loved so much. "You knew, didn't you?" I whispered to the photograph. "Somehow you knew this day would come, that we would need that strength, that shield you built for us." I felt a presence behind me. It was Sarah, holding 2 cups of tea. "Talking to Dad?" she asked with a small smile. "In a way," I replied, accepting the cup she offered me. "I was thinking about how he protected us, even without being here." Sarah sat beside me, looking at the photograph. "Sometimes I think he somehow knew about Richard," she commented, as if he foresaw that I might get involved with someone like that. "Your father was always very observant. He saw patterns where others only saw coincidences. Perhaps he noticed something in you, a tendency to please, to seek external approval, and he wanted to make sure you had the resources to free yourself if you found yourself in a situation like this." "I miss him," Sarah said softly. "I wish he could see who I've become now. He would see a strong, independent woman, exactly who he always wanted you to be." We drank our tea in comfortable silence, James's photograph between us as a silent reminder that his love and protection and still enveloped us, even after so many years. Apartment 302 was sold 2 months later for a value considerably higher than James had paid for it. Sarah and I decided to use part of that money to establish a foundation, the James Foundation, dedicated to helping women escape abusive relationships. We would offer temporary shelter, legal support, financial counseling, and most importantly, an environment where they could regain their self-esteem and independence. "It's full circle," Sarah commented during the foundation's opening ceremony. "The money that freed us will now help other women find their own freedom." I smiled, thinking about how that afternoon in the kitchen, the moment Richard pushed me and Sarah looked the other way, had been the catalyst for such a profound transformation in our lives. How, paradoxically, that moment of maximum humiliation had been the first step toward our liberation. We never heard directly from Richard again. Through mutual acquaintances, We learned that he had moved to another city, shattered not only by the end of the marriage, but mainly by the revelation that Sarah was rich, and he never knew it. His pride, his self-esteem, built on the illusion of control, had been irreparably damaged. "Do you think he changed?" Sarah asked one night as we were preparing dinner together. "Do you think he learned any lesson?" I shook my head slowly. Men like Richard rarely change, dear. They only find new victims, new targets for their control. That's why our work at the Foundation is so important. We need to help other women recognize the signs before it's too late. Sarah nodded, stirring the tomato sauce that was bubbling gently on the stove, the same sauce Richard had so cruelly criticized. Now she prepared it exactly as I had taught her, with pride and confidence. "You know what's funny, Mum? I spent years trying to make that sauce exactly the way Richard liked it. Hours in the kitchen, following his impossible instructions, listening to his constant criticisms. And in the end, I discovered that your sauce, the one he criticized so much, is absolutely perfect." I smiled, hugging her from behind as she continued stirring the pot. "Sometimes we need to step away from the critic to realize the beauty of what we are creating," I replied softly. That night, as we dined on the balcony, watching the city lights, I thought about how our lives had changed in just a few months. From humiliation to empowerment, from silence to voice, from submission to strength. "In the end, Mum," Sarah commented as if reading my thoughts, "Richard did us a favor. If he hadn't shown his true self that day in the kitchen, maybe I never would have found the courage to leave him." "Perhaps," I agreed. "Or perhaps the courage was always inside you, just waiting for the right moment to emerge." We raised our glasses in a silent toast. Not to Richard or the past, but to ourselves and to the future we had built from the ashes of humiliation. A future where neither of us would be thrown to the floor ever again. A future where we stood tall, heads held high, free. A year passed since the day of the fall in the kitchen. The scar on my temple had completely disappeared, but the memory remained, not as an open wound, but as a reminder of the path we had traveled. Our James Foundation was thriving. We had already helped dozens of women escape abusive relationships, offering not only temporary shelter, but also the resources and emotional support necessary for them to start over. Each success story was a small victory. Every woman who regained her independence was a testament to James's legacy. Sarah had transformed. The insecure, submissive woman who had allowed me to be assaulted in her kitchen had completely disappeared. In her place was a confident, determined woman who managed the foundation with a mix of compassion and efficiency that filled me with pride. "Do you know what impresses me most about the women we serve?" she commented one afternoon as we reviewed the Foundation's monthly reports. "It's not just the courage they show in leaving their abusers. It's how, once free, they bloom in ways they didn't even imagine were possible." "Like you," I observed. She smiled, acknowledging the truth in that observation. "Like both of us, Mum." It was true. I had bloomed too. At 69 years old, I discovered a new version of myself. Not just Sarah's mother or James's widow, but a whole woman, with purpose and a voice of her own. I became a speaker, sharing my story at meetings and conferences on domestic violence. My age, which could once have been seen as a limitation, had become an asset. People listened intently when I spoke. They respected the wisdom that came with the wrinkles on my face. At one of these conferences, I was approached by an elegant woman, approximately my age. She waited patiently for all the other participants to disperse before approaching. Her story moved me deeply. "Hello," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Stella, and I went through something very similar with my son-in-law." We talked for over an hour that day. Stella had lived through an almost identical situation: an abusive son-in-law, a daughter unable to break the cycle, the painful choice between helping and respecting the apparent boundaries of the adult daughter. "The difference," she said with a sad smile, "is that I didn't have a James to leave me a financial safety net. I had to rebuild my life at 65 years old, practically from scratch." "And you succeeded," I observed, admiring the strength of that woman. "Yes, I succeeded. Not with financial resources, but with determination. I started a small pastry business, something I always loved to do, and little by little I built a loyal clientele. Now I have my own store." We exchanged contacts that day. Stella became not only a friend, but a valuable collaborator at the foundation. Her story inspired other women, especially older ones, showing that it is never too late to start over, to rediscover one's own strength. It was Stella who suggested 6 months later that we expand the foundation's scope to include older women, often invisible, in discussions about domestic abuse. "There is a type of violence that specifically affects women our age," she explained during a foundation board meeting. "It is more subtle, more socially normalized. Financial control exerted by children, infantilization by caregivers, emotional abuse disguised as concern for their health." The Age and Dignity Project was born from that conversation. We created a specific program for women over 60 years old who faced situations of abuse, often perpetrated by close family members, including children and grandchildren. We offered everything from legal support to workshops on financial independence and the use of technology. "It's incredible how a moment of pain can transform into something so significant," I commented to Sarah one night, as we celebrated the foundation's first anniversary. We were on the terrace of our apartment, sharing a bottle of wine and admiring the starry sky. It was one of those perfect nights, when the temperature was pleasant and a light breeze brought the scent of the jasmine we had planted in pots. "You know, Mum," she replied thoughtfully, "sometimes I think it was necessary for you to be pushed to the floor for both of us to truly get up." The metaphor was precise. That fall in the kitchen had been literal and symbolic, the lowest point in our relationship, the moment when all the family dynamics collapsed. But it had also been the catalyst for a profound transformation. "Did you know," Sarah continued, "that the Japanese technique of kintsugi consists of repairing broken objects with gold? The idea is that the piece becomes more beautiful and valuable after being broken and repaired." "Like us," I concluded. "Exactly like us." That night, after Sarah retired, I stayed on the terrace for a while longer, contemplating the path we had travelled. I thought of James, of how he had foreseen in some way that this day might come. I thought of Richard, the man who tried to minimize us and ended up being the unintentional instrument of our liberation. And I thought of myself, the woman I had been and the one I had become. I remembered the exact moment I fell to the kitchen floor, the deafening silence of my daughter. I remembered the humiliation, the powerlessness, the rage. But now those memories no longer had the power to hurt me again. They were just parts of the story, stepping stones on the path that had brought me here. The fall in the kitchen had been just that, a fall. Painful, humiliating, memorable. But it had also been the beginning of a rise, the moment when both Sarah and I finally began to get up. I looked at the city stretching out below, alive and vibrant in the sunset light. I thought of all the women living there, young and old, rich and poor. Many of them, perhaps, at this exact moment, facing their own falls, their own humiliations. And I wished that each of them could find within herself the same strength that James always saw in me, the strength that was there all along, just waiting to be awakened. "The fall only wins if you don't get up," I repeated out loud, like a promise to the wind, to the stars that were beginning to dot the sky, to all the women who, like me, had been pushed to the floor, and especially a promise to myself, the woman who had finally learned to stand, head held high, invincible in her newfound strength. Never again would I be knocked down. Never again would I allow my dignity to be trampled. And as long as I lived, I would do everything in my power to help other women find the same power within themselves. Because in the end, that's what our story was about. Not revenge or retribution, but transformation, of metamorphosis, of breaking the shell of a life built on submission and being reborn as the person we were always meant to be. That was the true inheritance James had left Sarah and me. Not the millions in property and investments, but the seed of self-confidence, of dignity, of self-respect. An inheritance that no one could ever take away from us. Now, if you liked this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments what part left you speechless. Oh, and don't forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos that I don't post here. I'll wait for you there.